Shazia Illmi, you say that all these people who are criticizing you are politically motivated. I'm wondering whether you think the U.S.
What are your sources?
I'm wondering whether you think the U.S. State Department is also politically motivated against you when it highlighted a whole catalogue of restrictions that you've imposed on freedom of expression and the press, including, it said, violence, threats of violence or unjustified arrests or prosecutions of journalists, use of criminal libel laws to prosecute social media speech, censorship and site blocking. Strange that Mr. Modi didn't mention any of that when he was extolling Indian democracy in the US in the last few days. Why not? Are you embarrassed by these anti-democratic actions that you've taken?
You know something, Mr. Sebastian, you know a little something about me. We were mentioning this before I joined your show. I was a part of anti-corruption movement. I left journalism and I became a part of it. And you know, when I spoke about the UPA corruption, my leader, who was an octogenarian Gandhian, he was thrown into the jail. This is UPA, the previous government. And I wonder why none of these bodies talk about that. If you see the atrocities, if you see the emergency, which was a promulgation signed by Indira Gandhi, you will realize that it is not our government at all. If you see the protests that keep on going on...
So the State Department is wrong. You haven't answered the charges from the US State Department. Are they wrong? Are they politically motivated?
You please come to India or I'll send you some links. There is an industry in India. If you see the press, they thrive on Modi bashing.
And does the US State Department buy into that as well?
That's why
you haven't answered the charges.
I don't know.
You haven't answered the charges. You haven't answered the charges.
Yeah. I read the US report on human rights and they quoted one Rana Ayub. And Rana Ayub's report has not even held up to legal scrutiny. She has based her entire book. She's a fiction writer who writes on, it's like having J.K. Rowling's write on Brexit. You know, it's as hilarious as that. And she is the new champion, the articulator of Indian anguish. And the white man laments and uses these so-called fiction writers like Arundhati Roy to talk about the pain.
Shazia Illmi, the fact is, though,
it's a bit funny.
The fact is, I'm not going to let you speak endlessly for 10 minutes to answer each question.
And not let me answer.
You've had at least 3 minutes answering it.
Come at me with idiotic reports which have nothing to do with reality.
The State Department Human Rights Report is idiotic, is it? State Department Human Rights Report is idiotic.
I just mentioned that the State Report has quoted Rana Ayub.
Okay, well, they weren't quoting her there. They weren't quoting her there.
But you know what, Mr. Sebastian, you will not do one thing. But Mr. Sebastian, you will not do one thing. You are selectively quoting the State Report. Can I quote something else from the same report that you're quoting from?
You don't answer the particular questions.
You'll be embarrassed.
No, I'm not embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed in the slightest. I need to move on.
You will be embarrassed.
Shazia Illmi, I need to move on because we're wasting time here. I would like to ask you more questions.
You the same State Report. I want people to know that how selectively you picked up that bit. And I'm questioning that.
I'm talking about the criticism that was leveled.
That in 2019, the CBI, which is the Central Bureau of Investigation, filed charges against 10 Manipur police personnel for their alleged involvement in the death of a criminal suspect in 2009.
Yes.
This is under Modi's government. This is a state.
One incident.
And I can quote you many.
Thank you. You have made the point. If you would stop shouting at me for a moment, let's look at your worsening human rights record. In the last few weeks, the situation has got even worse with the accelerating crackdown on civil society. Just 2 weeks ago, Human Rights Watch reported fresh raids in different parts of the country on human rights activists, journalists, and other critics of the government. And we're seeing what the group called politically motivated allegations of tax evasion and financial irregularities manufactured to try and silence these people. The government must be very insecure if it's that worried about criticism. Why are you all so jittery in this government?
So you think that the various non-government organizations can take funds from overseas and not pay taxes? So tax evasion is allowed? they can violate the foreign exchange regulation authorities? Is that allowed in your country? Would you do that? Would you allow that in your country?
If you've had proof that they've done that, you haven't.
Yes, there is.
Otherwise, they'd be in jail. Otherwise, they'd be in jail, and they're not in jail.
Yes, there is proof.
In jail. You just simply harass them continually.
There is a case against them.
You simply harass them continually.
No, that is not true. There is a case. There are cases against them. There are cases pending against them, and they know that.
I want to mention the case of one human rights activist, Stan Swamy, who you arrested in October last year on what one UN Special Rapporteur called fabricated terrorism charges, brought as it happened under the much criticised Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Despite repeated appeals by the UN to your government, Father Swamy, a Catholic priest who was 84 years old, suffered from Parkinson's disease, was subjected to repeated harassment and interrogation and died in custody on July the 5th after contracting COVID. The Special Rapporteur, Mary Lawler, has said his death will forever remain a stain on India's human rights record. Do you understand why?
Do you realize how incorrect you are? Do you even know that Stan Swamy was actually in the hospital? Do you realize what these misleading reports lead to? Do you know because I have seen this case.
For the last few days of his life, he was repeatedly refused bail. He was repeatedly refused bail.
Because he was involved in violence. He was in Bhivaji, Koregaon violence. He was one of the prime instigators. And the law does not discriminate. If you have perpetrators of crime,
this is a man who dedicated his life to defending the rights of indigenous people.
According to you,
he had severe tremor, according to the UN. According to the UN experts. Are they wrong? Are they making it all up, the UN?
Tell me something. There would be so many Nazi criminals who would be very old, but they were still tried, right? They were Nuremberg trials.
Do you know that suffering from Parkinson's disease, he had severe tremors in both hands?
Yes, but he was...
He asked in November for a drinking straw. He asked in November for a drinking straw and warm clothes, and he was denied both. And he was denied both.
He was a co-conspirator in a very violent riot.
You wouldn't even give him a drinking straw or warm clothes when he asked for them in November.
That is not true. That is again lies.
It beggars belief that a state claiming to be a democracy could treat a sick old man like that.
Do not allow others to speak. You have invited me here to answer your questions. I don't have to listen to all that you are accusing me, our government of. So give me time. He suffered a cardiac arrest in Holy Family Hospital and he passed away in 5 days later. And he was the one who was inciting people and was giving provocative speeches. And he was accused of promoting enmity between different caste groups. And he who said the answer has to be in street warfare. The caste conflict can only be resolved by fighting on the streets. Would you allow that in Germany or in London or in UK, the UK?
Your government,
would you allow that?
Your government has double standards.
I don't know. Why would you have double standards in your country and mine? Would you allow violent protests in yours?
Do you know, Shazia Illmi, we have the case of this man.
You have no business talking to me like this. You're not interrogating me. It is my country. It's a sovereign right. And people who will be accusing and creating riots in my country will be punished. Just remember that.
He was given no chance to prove his innocence in court. He did not have his day in court.
That is not true.
He was never convicted of anything.
I think your research team is extremely biased, and so are you. You ought to do better. We expect more from you, Mr. Sebastian.
What sentence was he given? Was he convicted, and if so, by which court? Was he convicted?
Do you know the constitution of a country? Do you know there are checks and balances?
Was he convicted or not?
Will you listen to me? Will you listen to me? Do you know who does the convictions? The court does the convictions. Please give me 2 minutes or even one. There is executive, legislature and judiciary. There is something called separation of powers. These are the checks and balances in a democracy, which is why we are a great, vibrant democracy.
Was he convicted, yes or no?
Can you listen to me? You'll have to listen to me. Can you listen to me? So the judiciary decides the conviction. And there is pendency. And it is not good. It is terrible. But the executive and legislature has nothing to do with it. So this has nothing to do with Prime Minister Modi or me. Do you get that? That is the Indian Constitution. So you are saying that we should remove the checks and balances that keep our democracy alive?
No, I didn't say anything at all about that. I said a sick 84-year-old human rights defender
this is the most idiotic
died
way
without ever having a day in court to prove his innocence. That's all the point I'm making. Shazia Illmi, thank you.
That is nothing to do. That is nothing to do.
Thank you for being on Conflict Zone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.